Hey guys, so this is a topic that's always been really interesting to me, but I never really felt I had the ability to talk about properly, but I'd like to at least make an attempt in this video. Before I continue, I also want to make a disclaimer that none of the theology or beliefs here are held by every Christian or every Muslim. They are based off of scripture and common beliefs and practices within these groups, but I'm not trying to generalize any Muslims or Christians and lump in progressive people, whether it's in spite of their holy book or due to a more progressive reading of it. This video will also feature some small clips and quotes from ex-Muslims, so please go check out those videos. I will also be linking some channels of ex-Muslims whose content informed parts of this video, and I think that their voices need to be heard the loudest on this topic, so please check out the description. I think that's everything for the intro, so let's just get into it. Before talking about either religion or any political motivations in specific, I want to discuss why criticizing religion in general is so looked down upon or seen as taboo. This in and of itself is an extremely complex topic spanning like centuries and vast amounts of cultures and religions, and I'm undoubtedly going to get comments saying it's actually because of this, not that, and chances are those people will also be right, but I'm going to try and touch on two major things that are particularly relevant to the faiths we're discussing in this video, as this is a massive topic on its own. A major issue is an insecure sense of belief. While this is often more applicable to everyday people, religious organizations in themselves aren't exempt. I think this quote from Sam Harris is very to the point. Religion is the one area of our discourse in which people are systematically protected from the demand to give good evidence and valid arguments in defense of their strongly held beliefs. End quote. Whether you agree that there is evidence for religious figures or stories or gods, chances are you only hold those beliefs in service of your own religion. At the end of the day, there is no substantial evidence for any supernatural claims made by any religion, and the grains of truth or references to real historical events are clung to as evidence of the much larger amounts of supernatural and unverified claims. People citing unreviewed, debunked studies about lost pieces of the Ark have blinders on to the mountains of actual published and peer-reviewed research showing a global flood didn't happen, to the historians explaining why, without gods, flood myths are so common, or the myriad of ways that these bad papers have been debunked by scholars and just everyday people alike. For both Christianity and Islam to function, there needs to be a balance between the evidence to prevent people from seeing the blatant falsehoods or questioning the validity of these stories, and yet be unproven enough to justify and encourage their heavy emphasis on blind faith in God and not being convinced by worldly means. Religion is scared of criticism because it has no leg to stand on, and with the amount of power that religious organizations have had throughout history, the theology inside their texts that were designed for control, and the often extreme rhetoric about heretics and sinners, it's been able to create a world where, as Sam Harris said, it is systematically exempt from justifying itself. Tying into this fear, though not exclusively due to it, religion often lends itself to being extremely easy to exploit as a means of control. The Catholic Church from the 5th century onwards is the most notorious example of this, with Christian theology lending itself extremely well to figures who want to take control of both everyday lives and the overall rights of the people it presides over. Many religions have strict and often arbitrary rules on the behavior and often even thoughts of its followers, alongside extreme methods of how to handle those that disobey them. People who desire this kind of control can be drawn to pursue religious positions, as by questioning them, you're questioning God, and you can't question God. Alongside setting up a perfect system to exert control, it also breeds an intense fear of what may happen to you if you choose to question it or worse outright deviate from it. Not just in the sense of what these leaders or groups may do to you, but what God may do to you, and what may be waiting for you when you die.
I have reached that critical point in my development where my reproductive organs started doing their thing, which apparently means I am now eligible for hell. No longer do I have the innocence of a child. I am now subject to the full extent of your wrath.
This intense fear can often even persist for people who no longer believe in the religion. Millions of people have left Christianity but were taught from such a young age to be terrified of that prospect and still have a fear of hell. While this is obviously a comedic example, the character of Elder Price from Book of Mormon begins questioning his faith, and at the end of the musical states he no longer believes in God, but as he breaks a rule and leaves his mission partner, he has a quote-unquote hell dream convincing him to stay. Despite the comedy of this scene, it's not uncommon for people with religious trauma, both inside and outside the religion they were or are a part of, to experience nightmares, panic attacks, and breakdowns over the kind of existential terror of what happens if they don't follow these rules. Religions exert control both through these religious figures like the church and through psychological means. Criticizing religion places the power held by the church into question, and if you can actually question God, then you can absolutely question the people who claim to represent it. To the psychological aspect, the people experiencing this level of control over their lives as well as thoughts are sometimes scared and therefore often reactive to anything that may induce questioning that's not allowed. Obviously, like I said, these things are very tied to Abrahamic faiths, and there are a million and one other intertwined reasons for why religion is taboo to question, but these are applicable to the topic at hand, I feel. This is where I'll get into the contrast of the way leftists tend to discuss Christianity versus Islam. It's not at all uncommon for leftists to give unfiltered and harsh criticism of Christianity, and I do see this as a good thing, don't get me wrong, but when discussing Islam, the conversation often turns to that of defense and accusations of bigotry. It's not uncommon to see ex-Muslims often excluded from discussions on religions in leftist spaces either, despite them being personally harmed by the same rhetoric leftists call out among Christians. Many of the reasons for Christianity being criticized so openly among the left is due to our emphasis on human rights. Christianity is overwhelmingly anti-abortion, homophobic, and in the US, very set on creating a theocracy. Verses and actions promoting misogyny, purity culture, and violence are often cited by leftists, while when these similar sentiments are pointed out among the Quran, it often results in some variation of "you're Islamophobic," "hijabs are empowering," or "I know a lot of progressive Muslims." This feels hypocritical to me, as many Christian women claim their position as a quote-unquote helpmeet or wearing modest clothing is empowering, while simultaneously saying it's due to scripture and their husbands. But people will rightfully point out that it's sad women are fighting for their own subjugation in these spaces. And yet, a hijab enforced by these same sentiments is empowering and women making their own choices. I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that leftists rightfully see Muslims in the West as an oppressed group, while Christians are the majority and the ones actually pushing these harmful views that they share on everyone else, as opposed to those already indoctrinated. But there's a major difference between advocating for the right for Muslims to peacefully exist and actually excusing harmful and bigoted beliefs that are held as a result of Islam. The shift from general hatred and fear-mongering towards Islam in the West to a level of protectiveness and care is genuinely a good thing. After 9/11, a massive portion of Americans, especially on the right, but still to a degree everyone, easily bought into the propaganda and demonizing rhetoric surrounding Muslims, the Middle East, and honestly just people of color in general. It's evident, whether it be through World War II and the racism aimed against Japan, or the shocking rise in anti-Semitism even in the West, the Cold War and Red Scare, or through 9/11 and Islamophobia, that when people are scared, they are significantly more likely to buy into propaganda and even dehumanize the people who are negatively affected by the very event that sparked the fear in the first place, just like themselves. The work of leftists who fight for Muslims is not at all meant to be undermined in this video and is absolutely necessary and has made leaps and bounds of progress, but that is also exactly why I think this conversation needs to be had. Fighting for the right to wear a hijab or advocating against wars that only serve to kill civilians in Iraq is a good thing. Those things, however, do not mean that the ideology itself should be excused from perpetuating harmful beliefs. It is possible to support people's right to believe something while simultaneously being critical of that belief. To call criticism against Islam as a belief system Islamophobia only waters down the genuine violence committed against Muslims in the States. An example that I think is like an almost perfect parallel is the discussion around hijabs, and purity culture or modesty in general. I am in no way advocating to infringe on someone's right to wear a hijab, burqa, or anything else, but it's a true statement that those outfits are only worn due to the promotion of women being inherently sexualized for existing, that women are only good if they are pure, and that men are not responsible for their own actions even when that action is sexual assault. When I say this, I'm often met with an assumption that I look down upon Muslim women or that I want to outright ban modest veiling of some kind. That to criticize the system that influenced that woman's choice means that I think that the choice should be taken away from her. As I mentioned in my previous video, I don't believe a choice is made under coercion or made without information to alternatives that can be freely explored is truly a choice. To wear a hijab because you fear either familial, community, or existential harm by not doing so is not a choice. To be indoctrinated into a religion at a young age or otherwise vulnerable state does not allow for choice.
Your name is the first thing to enter my ear. I am too young to comprehend it, of course, but you have just been assigned to me for the rest of my life. I'm getting used to hearing your name. It's embedded in human names, in my language, in the call to prayer I hear every single day.
And not all people who wear a hijab, nor all people who follow some form of modesty code in general, are in that position, but those people are the minority, and suppressing outside ideas from being expressed is not conducive to more people being given informed choices. Usually, suppression of criticism comes from inside that belief system, but in the case of Western Islam, it has started to bleed into generally secular spaces in a misguided attempt to curb Islamophobia. Contrast this to Christianity, the idea of modesty and purity is nearly as prominent, and people who criticize that scripture and the motivation behind modest dress are not saying that it's wrong of someone to dress modestly or that they should simply not be allowed to do so. When people criticize people like Mrs. Midwest or Girl Defined for constantly pushing modesty, it's not because they think that they should be wearing more revealing clothing. It's because their motivation for doing so, not only extending to themselves but to convince others, is done out of that same misogynistic and victim-blaming worldview. It's not the prairie dress itself, it's the misogyny, and it's not the hijab itself, it's the misogyny.
I come from a community where hijab is mandatory, and it's a type of hijab that is not just, it's not reducible to a mode of clothing or wearing some cloth around your head. It's rooted in a modesty doctrine. It's rooted in a doctrine that privileges sexual purity almost over everything else.
I don't think further stigmatizing the criticism of religion, or Islam in particular, is doing any favors for protecting the rights of Muslims. It's not stopping or even addressing real genocides happening in Palestine or China. It's not fighting against laws that ban wearing hijabs like in France, and it's not fighting social stigma or xenophobia. It's definitely not stopping the US from ripping apart Muslim countries. It's watering down the term while further isolating people who are genuinely harmed by that religion's treatment of them from any perspective that may have made them make a leap to leaving. If you want to fight for Muslim women, fight against not only their right to wear a hijab, but also their right not to. Fight against purity culture and victim blaming, even when it's perpetuated by Islam. We all still allow Christianity to exist without excusing its homophobia, its misogyny, or its authoritarian control. We can do the same thing for any other religion. Thanks for watching, guys. Hadeh.
I stare at the populace in prayer.